The great chamber of the conclave hummed with a music she could not find a melody in. It was the sound of 100 diplomats from a dozen star-faring species, their conversations a cascade of clicking mandibles, low rumbles, and translated pleasantries that held no warmth. She stood at the periphery, a silent figure in gowns of iridescent gray, the colors shifting like a misty dawn. She was the daughter of a celestial sovereign, heir to a culture of profound telepathic grace, and here, among the galaxy's powers, she was utterly unseen. Her people communicated in layered streams of thought, emotion, image. Speech, this crude extrusion of sound, was a barbaric and imprecise art to them. Here, amidst the noise, her gentle psychic presence, a thing of quiet wonder at home, was drowned out completely. It was not hostility she faced, but something worse, a uniform, polite indifference. Envoys would acknowledge her escort, bow to her title, and then their eyes would slide away, seeking a conversation that did not require such laborious effort. She was a statue, beautiful and mute, in a room too loud to hear its silence. The human delegation was new, only recently granted observer status after their rapid, chaotic climb to the stars. They were a study in disorganized energy. Their ambassador, a man with kind eyes and a tired smile, worked the room diligently. Beside him moved a younger aide, whose role seemed undefined. He was not the lead negotiator, nor the tech specialist who fumbled with a faulty translator pin. He was simply there, observing with a focus that was intense yet unassuming. While others sought the strategic advantage, the high-value trade partners, his gaze wandered. It paused on the intricate murals of the chamber ceiling, on the subtle distress flicker of a servitor droid, and finally, on her. He noticed not just the royal diadem, but the way her hands were clasped so tightly the delicate skin strained. He saw how her escort, a tall, dignified figure, was engaged in a deep discussion, leaving her isolated in plain sight. He saw the profound loneliness that her perfect posture could not conceal. During a recess, she drifted to a vast viewport overlooking the galactic rim. A nebula sprawled in silent splendor, a palette of violets and deep blues that reminded her of the twilight seas of home. The ache of homesickness was a sharp physical pain. A presence settled beside her, not too close, respectful of her space. It was the young human aide. He did not speak. He simply looked out at the same nebula dot. After a long moment, he made a soft, appreciative sound. "It never gets old, does it?" he said, his voice low. "Makes the whole political circus feel rather small." The sound of his words, unadorned and sincere, startled her. She turned her head slightly. He offered a small, tentative smile, nothing more. He did not bombard her with questions or flattery. He just shared the view. Then he did something inexplicable. He gently patted the bulkhead beside him, a simple rhythmic tap of his fingers. Tap dash, tap dash, tap dash, tap. Pause. Tap tap. It was deliberate, not random. A shiver, not of fear but of shocking recognition, went through her. The pattern was not a known code, but its structure. It had the cadence of a basic emotional signature in her own telepathy, a pulse of calm, an offer of peaceful contact. It could not be. Humans were psychically inert, their minds quiet to her senses. Locked behind bone and instinct, he saw her reaction, the slight widening of her eyes. "My sister," he said, still looking at the stars, his voice barely above a murmur. "She's a composer, and she's deaf. The whole world of sound for her is patterns of vibration. She taught me that communication finds a way. You just have to pay attention to a different frequency." He slowly extended his hand, not to take hers, but to place it, palm up, on the smooth railing between them. An invitation, a question. Trembling, driven by a hope so fierce it threatened to unmoor her, she reached out. Her fingers, slender and cool, hovered just above his palm. She closed her eyes, not to shut the world out, but to focus. She cast the gentlest thread of her essence, the simplest glyph of greeting and question, not into his mind, but onto the skin of his hand. He did not flinch. A slow, wondrous smile spread across his face. Cool, he breathed, like a gentle static buzz. Hello back. He couldn't hear her thoughts, but he could feel her intention on his skin, a sensation he interpreted with startling accuracy. He thought for a second, then, with his other hand's index finger, he carefully drew a slow circle on his own palm, then pointed to her, and then to the nebula. You, beautiful, like that dot tears, hot and silent, welled in her eyes. It was a translation, a clumsy, magnificent translation. For the first time since arriving at the conclave, someone was not speaking at her or around her. They were trying to speak with her. A connection was forged in that quiet corner. He became her refuge. In stolen moments between sessions, they would meet. He brought a small, smooth datapad. He would draw simple pictures. A star, a smiling face, a frown. She would respond by projecting subtle temperature shifts onto his skin, warm for approval, cool for denial, and layered textures smooth for calm, prickly for distress. They built a lexicon of touch and symbol. He learned that a quick light tap from her meant curiosity. She learned that a firm, steady pressure from him meant reassurance. He learned of her world's silent songs, of thought choirs and memory choral. She learned of human music, of symphonies built for ears and vibrations felt in the heart. He told her of mountains and oceans. She showed him, through intricate drawings he guided her to make on the pad, the floating cities of her home. The final gala of the conclave was a spectacle of light and sound. For her, it was a fresh torment. The din was overwhelming, the push of unguarded, chaotic emotions from so many species, a psychic cacophony. She stood frozen on the edge of the dance floor, a jeweled centerpiece of diplomacy, drowning in the noise. Her escort was across the room. Panic, cold and sharp, began to lace her senses. And he was there. He had no rank, no protocol reason to approach. But he did. He walked through the crowd, his simple human suit a stark contrast to the galactic finery. He ignored the looks, the slight whispers. He stopped before her and gave a small, formal bow, not to the princess, but to her. He did not ask with words. He simply extended his hand, palm open, just as he had at the viewport. An offer, a lifeline. Every eye in their vicinity turned to watch. The act was incomprehensible. A human touching a telepathic royal. It was a breach of a dozen unspoken rules. But in his hand was no demand, no political calculation. There was only quiet understanding. She placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid, an anchor in her storm. He led her, not onto the traditional dance floor, but through a side archway onto a secluded terrace bathed in starlight. The music faded to a dull throb. The psychic noise vanished. Only the stars and the quiet remained. He did not release her hand. "It's quieter out here," he said. She turned his hand over in hers and, with a focused thought, projected not a word, but a pure, warm feeling of gratitude and relief onto his skin. It was the most complex emotion she had yet dared to share. He took a slow breath, his eyes bright. "I know," he whispered. "Me too." They stood in silence, hands clasped, looking at the galaxy. The conclave inside debated treaties and trade routes, matters of great import. But on the terrace, a transaction of infinitely greater significance was completed. It was not recorded in any log. It required no translator. It was a simple, silent affirmation written in shared warmth and a firm, gentle hold. He had offered his hand. She had taken it. And in that touch, two souls from the noise of the universe had finally found a frequency all their own. It was not a rescue, nor a grand romance begun. It was a simple human act of seeing someone who was invisible and choosing, with nothing to gain, to say, "I see you." And in the vast, cold calculus of galactic politics, that proved to be the most powerful force of all.